Euphoria Season 3 sucks, and we're going to tell you why. Remember when Euphoria felt beautiful? Not healthy, not realistic, but beautiful. The first two seasons made even the worst moments feel hypnotic. The neon lights, the blue haze, Labyrinth's music, the dreamy camera work. It felt like watching teenagers self-destruct through a fever dream. But this season, it feels dirty. Not emotionally messy, but physically dirty. Yellow lighting, grimy strip clubs, uncomfortable shock scenes, flat music. Everything feels colder and harsher. And I don't think people are reacting to the plot itself nearly as much as they're reacting to the fact that the entire emotional identity of the show changed. Because honestly, Rue's storyline makes sense. Cassie and Nate make sense. Even the darker tone makes sense after a time jump. So why does this season suddenly feel so off? I think it comes down to four things. The visuals, the way the show handles sex and shock value, the missing emotional energy from the music, and the fact that the characters barely feel connected anymore.
One of the biggest reasons this season feels different is the visual language has completely changed. The first two seasons leaned heavily into cool blues, purples, glitter makeup, dreamy lighting, and that very Y2K inspired aesthetic. Even the camera work felt emotional and even surreal. It was stylized chaos. This season looks almost vintage in comparison. Everything is covered in yellows, golds, browns, almost like a faded 50s or 60s Americana filter. And I actually think that choice is intentional. The earlier seasons felt like exaggerated teenage memories. Everything was heightened emotionally, every party felt larger than life, every heartbreak felt cinematic. This season feels like reality finally caught up to these characters. The glamour is disappearing. Even the environments feel older and more exhausted now. Less fantasy, less escapism.
And I think the tonal shift becomes even more obvious in the way the show handles sex and shock scenes now. Because Euphoria was always explicit. But earlier seasons usually framed those moments with emotion or fantasy. Even the toxic Cassie and Nate storyline still had this dramatic, romantic intensity to it. The music, lighting, and pacing made it feel emotionally heightened. This season feels much grungier. The strip club scenes feel intentionally uncomfortable and transactional. Some of the more shocking moments feel designed more to disgust the audience than to emotionally pull them into the characters. The show used to aestheticize self-destruction, but now it feels like it's forcing you to sit in how ugly it actually is. And maybe that's the point. Maybe Euphoria is intentionally stripping away the fantasy it built in earlier seasons. But I also think that's why so many viewers feel disconnected from this season, even if they can't fully explain why. This level of darkness just isn't what they signed up for.
But honestly, the biggest missing piece is the music. Labyrinth wasn't just making background songs for Euphoria, he was the emotional atmosphere of the show. The first two seasons had these huge emotional musical moments. Choir vocals, haunting synths, dramatic build-ups, where scenes almost felt transcendent. The music made the characters' emotions feel massive. Even when Rue was spiraling, there was still this strange beauty to it, because the soundtrack pulled you into her emotional state. Now the score feels much flatter, quieter, even off-putting. There are moments when the music feels so mismatched, it actually takes away from the scene. Perfect example is Maddie's entrance to Cassie and Nate's wedding. A big dramatic moment with an out-of-place, beachy jingle attached. Overall, there are fewer emotional peaks, fewer moments where the music completely takes over a scene and makes you feel something. The old soundtrack told you what the characters couldn't say out loud. Now the silence feels bigger. And whether intentional or not, the emotional emptiness is impossible not to notice.
But I think the most underrated reason this season feels different is that the characters barely interact as a group anymore. Season 2 especially was filled with these huge ensemble scenes that made the world feel alive. The parties, the intervention on the staircase, the Oklahoma bathroom scene, the play episode, everyone constantly collided with each other. That chaos is what made Euphoria feel fun, even when the storylines were dark. This season feels much more isolated. Everyone is stuck in their own separate storyline, and because of that, the show feels emotionally fragmented. And weirdly enough, I think a scene this season proves exactly what's missing. The scene where all the girls are together at Lexi's, taking pictures of Cassie, suddenly felt like old Euphoria again. It had energy, it had chemistry, it felt messy and alive. For a moment, the characters actually felt connected, instead of trapped in completely separate shows. I think that scene stood out to so many people because it reminded viewers what made Euphoria feel special in the first place. The characters bouncing off of each other.
And to be fair, I actually think some of the storylines make total sense. Rue's storyline feels like a very natural continuation of her character arc. The drug smuggling storyline is darker, but Rue was always headed towards bigger consequences and more dangerous situations. This doesn't feel random, it feels like the safety net around her finally disappeared. Same with Cassie and Nate. Them trying to build this fake, perfect adult image while living completely outside of their means feels exactly like something those characters would do. So I don't think the issue is necessarily the writing decisions themselves. I think the issue is that the emotional language of Euphoria changed.
Euphoria used to make dysfunction feel intoxicating. Now it makes that same dysfunction feel exhausting. And maybe that's intentional. Maybe the fantasy was always supposed to collapse eventually. But at the same time, that dreamlike emotional style, the music, the group dynamics, and that feeling of chaotic connection was what made so many people fall in love with the show in the first place.
So the real question is Euphoria evolving with its characters? Or is it losing the identity that made it special? Maybe Euphoria changed, or maybe TV just moved on without it. Either way, we want to hear your take. Comment below and subscribe to the Couch Crew for more deep dives like this.
Talk to you soon. Bye.